to something that I believe will help increase your levels of confidence and self-esteem over time. Because this is something that I did a lot when I first started my self-improvement journey, and it definitely helped. So let's jump right into it. Now, whenever you're sitting in public, whether it's at a restaurant, at the school library, on a park bench, or even on public transportation, you are taking up a certain amount of space. I want you to think about how you usually settle yourself down in places like this for a second. Do you lay out your belongings, spread out your bags and clothes, open up your body and take up a lot of space? Or do you tend to keep all of your belongings close and body closed? Do you try your best to squeeze everything into as little of a space as possible? Chances are, if you're suffering from low levels of self-esteem and confidence, that you are someone who doesn't take up much space. And this can be for a variety of reasons, but the two most common mentalities that I come across when working with many of you one-on-one is that you believe that you aren't worthy, that you don't have the right to take up much space, or you feel like it would be disturbing or disrespectful towards other people. Today we're going to dissect and analyze these two ways of thinking one by one, and then I'm going to show you a simple little exercise that you can do to help combat these two unhealthy mentalities. So, number one, if you believe that you aren't worthy enough of taking up more space, listen. You have the same rights as everyone else when it comes to public spaces. Let's say, for example, you go to a restaurant by yourself to eat and they give you a 2-seat table. This entire table is your space while you're eating at this restaurant. They've literally granted you this property momentarily in return for your hard-earned money. So you absolutely have the right to take up as much of this space as possible, right? Nobody else is going to sit at your table. Nobody else is going to place their unfinished dish on your table because it's your space. You have the right to be there, at least until you finish eating. You need to learn how to accept this fact, to become comfortable claiming your rightful space when you are in public. So what I want you to do is the next time you're in a public space like a restaurant or a somewhat empty library, I want you to spread out your belongings. Put your bag and your jacket on that empty seat next to you. Move your chair back, lean back, and open up your body. Place your books and devices around you. Spread them out a little bit more than you are used to. This will train you to become more comfortable taking up your rightful space. Now, when you do this, you will most likely be met with some resistance. Your subconscious will say things like, what are you doing? This isn't your house. Who gave you the right to do this? Who do you think you are? And it's here where you must fight back. Because again, this is public space. You absolutely do have the right to take up a reasonable amount of space. And I'm not telling you to spread your legs eagle wide on a crowded bus when there's an old lady holding a baby standing next to you. I'm telling you to take up more space when there's not too many people around you, when it's not an inconvenience to others. And the reason this little exercise is so critical when it comes to your levels of confidence and your self-esteem is because this will affect your identity and the way you view yourself. It's been said that there are 3 ways to change one's identity and one's beliefs: hypnosis, trauma, and good old repetition. This exercise uses repetition to change the way you view yourself. Your identity will naturally align itself with your actions. If you constantly take up very little space and you think to yourself, this is all I'm worth, I don't have the right to take up more space, then that will become your identity. You will genuinely believe that you are worth less than other human beings. In order to combat this, you must do the opposite. You must force yourself to take up more space, and then you must remind yourself that you have the right to do so, that you have the same rights as everyone else. And over time, via repetition, you will slowly start believing it, and your confidence and self-esteem will rise. And that brings us to the second mentality that you might have if you take up very little space. And that's the idea that you are afraid of disturbing or coming across as disrespectful to others. Now, this is actually an indicator that you might score very high in a personality trait called agreeableness. Now, for those of you that aren't familiar with this trait, it is actually one of the most studied personality traits out there, and it's a combination of two things. Number one, the extent to which you value getting along with others, and number two, the degree to which you are willing to be critical of others. The more agreeable you are, the more likely you are to do favors for people, even if it's not good for you. The more likely you are to keep your opinions to yourself instead of sharing them. The more likely you are to be scared of confrontation or even simply disagreeing with someone else. And this is actually a trait that can be extremely detrimental if you score very high for it, and if you are a man. Studies have found that men who score high on agreeableness make on average $10,000 less than men who score low on agreeableness. Another study found that men who are rated high on agreeableness are seen as the worst candidates for leadership roles. Yes, they finish dead last. So instead of thinking nice guys finish last, you should be thinking super agreeable guys finish last. And there's a simple reason for that. People who are too agreeable don't stand up for themselves. They let others push them around, and they never say no because they're too scared of offending others. If you score very high on this trait, you will go through life doing things that make others happy, but almost never doing things for yourself. And this will actually reinforce the idea that you aren't worthy enough. You'll think that other people are worth more than you, and that you should sacrifice your own happiness for theirs. Now, luckily for you, how agreeable you are is not a permanent set in stone trait. It can be changed over time, again, via repetition. And I would recommend you to use the same exercise we mentioned before. Every time you're out in public, push yourself to physically take up more space. When you do this, you might subconsciously have some thoughts like, oh my God, I look like an asshole, or I'm being so rude right now. And if you do, take a look around you. Are you in an extremely crowded area where someone else needs that space? If you are, then yes, you should give up that space. But if you are in a generally empty location, then you are good to go. Spread yourself out. So what if someone thinks you look like an asshole? There isn't anyone out there at that moment that needs that space. So you have every right to use it. It's public space. You are in the clear. The more times you do this, the less agreeable you will become, and you will find it easier to stand up for yourself over time. It will become easier for you to speak your opinions. Have you ever had a thought in a conversation, but you were too scared to say it? But then you go home and you say to yourself, wow, I wish I spoke my mind. Well, this exercise will help with that. Try it out the next time you're in public and let me know what happens. Because again, this exercise genuinely helped me grow more confident, so I hope it can do the same for you.